Carl Jung's The Shadow, written and published by Ngasline. In the depths of our psyche lurks a force both terrifying and transformative, the shadow self that Carl Jung identified as the repository of all we deny, fear, and push away from our conscious identity. Yet, paradoxically, this shadow holds not only our darkest aspects, but also our most potent gifts, locked away behind walls of societal conditioning and personal fear. Jung discovered that those who dare to face their shadow, to embrace the rejected parts of themselves, often unlock extraordinary potential that had been hidden beneath layers of self-censorship and denial. Like a master key to authentic power, shadow work reveals that what we fear most in ourselves often contains the very qualities needed for our completeness, and that our greatest growth lies not in perfecting our public persona, but in integrating the aspects of ourselves we've been too afraid to. Acknowledge or embrace. Lesson 1. Your darkness holds your greatest power. In the depths of our psyche lies a force so potent that most of us spend our lives running from it. This force, which Carl Jung termed the shadow, contains not only our darkest fears and impulses, but also our greatest untapped potential. It's a paradox that the very aspects of ourselves we try hardest to deny or suppress often hold the keys to our most extraordinary capabilities. The shadow forms in our earliest years as we learn what parts of ourselves are acceptable to family, society, and culture. We quickly discover that certain thoughts, feelings, and behaviors earn approval, while others lead to rejection or punishment. In response, we begin to hide away these unacceptable parts of ourselves, creating a shadow self that grows alongside our conscious personality. This process of shadow formation is natural and necessary for social development, but problems arise when we become too rigid in our rejection of these disowned aspects. The power we push into the shadow doesn't simply disappear. It operates autonomously, influencing our lives in ways we don't recognize or understand. The ambitious drive we deny might emerge as unconscious sabotage of others' success. The anger we refuse to acknowledge might manifest as passive, aggressive behavior or psychosomatic illness. The relationship between power and darkness is ancient and archetypal. Throughout mythology and literature, heroes must venture into the underworld or face dragons in dark caves to claim their treasure or power. These stories reflect a psychological truth. Our greatest power often lies hidden in the parts of ourselves we fear to explore. The warrior's strength, the lover's passion, the magician's knowledge. These primal energies reside in our shadow when we're too afraid to claim them consciously. We fear our own potential because it threatens the safe, familiar identity we've constructed. Owning our full power means taking responsibility for our lives in a new way. It means facing the possibility of success and the fear of failure that comes with it. It means acknowledging our capacity for impact, both creative and destructive. Many people, as Marianne Williamson noted, are more afraid of their light than their darkness. Yet history provides countless examples of individuals who transformed their shadow aspects into sources of extraordinary achievement. Consider how Martin Luther King Jr. channeled righteous anger into powerful advocacy for social change, or how Maya Angelou transformed childhood trauma into profound artistic expression. These figures didn't eliminate their darkness. They integrated it, allowing its energy to fuel their highest purposes. The shadow also contains our unlived potential, the talents, dreams, and capabilities we've denied out of fear or social conditioning. The artist who becomes an accountant to please their parents might find their creative energy emerging in destructive ways if not consciously reclaimed. The natural leader who plays small out of fear of standing out might express their power through manipulation rather than direct influence. Understanding and integrating our shadow isn't about becoming dark or negative. It's about becoming whole. When we can acknowledge and work consciously with all aspects of our psyche, we access a completeness of being that brings authentic power. This power doesn't come from dominating or controlling our shadow, but from dancing with it, learning from it, and allowing its energy to flow naturally in service of our highest good. The journey into our shadow requires courage, compassion, and curiosity. It asks us to question our assumptions about good and bad, light and dark, strength and weakness. As we begin this exploration, we discover that what we feared most often becomes our greatest ally. The darkness we've been running from transforms into the very force that propels us toward our fullest expression of who we are meant to be. Lesson 2. What you hate in others lives in you. The most profound revelations about ourselves often come through our interactions with others, particularly those who trigger strong emotional reactions within us. When we find ourselves intensely disliking someone's behavior or characteristics, we're often encountering what Carl Jung called projection, the unconscious act of seeing our own unacknowledged qualities in others. Consider the person who strongly criticizes others for being lazy while pushing themselves to exhaustion, never allowing a moment's rest. Their harsh judgment of others' work ethics might actually reflect their own denied desire for rest and relaxation. Or think about someone who becomes disproportionately angry at others' displays of vulnerability, perhaps because they've buried their own need to be vulnerable so deeply that seeing it in others threatens their carefully constructed defenses. These projections serve as a psychological mirror, reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves we've pushed into our shadow. The qualities we find most irritating, offensive, or even repulsive in others are often the very aspects of ourselves that we've denied, repressed, or tried to eliminate. This phenomenon explains why we might feel an inexplicable surge of anger when witnessing someone being boastful, only to realize later that we've been denying our own desire for recognition and appreciation. The mirror effect of relationships provides us with countless opportunities for self-discovery and growth. Every strong emotional reaction we have to others contains valuable information about our shadow aspects. When we find ourselves judging someone harshly, we can pause and ask ourselves, what aspect of myself am I seeing in this person? This simple yet powerful question begins the process of reclaiming our projected qualities. Working with projections consciously requires courage and honesty. It means acknowledging that the traits we most despise in others might exist within ourselves. This doesn't mean we must approve of harmful behavior, but rather that we should examine why certain behaviors trigger such strong reactions in us. For instance, if we're particularly bothered by someone's need for attention, we might discover our own unfulfilled desire to be seen and acknowledged. The process of recognizing and reclaiming our projections leads to greater self-awareness and compassion, both for ourselves and others. When we understand that our judgments of others often stem from our own unacknowledged qualities, we can begin to approach our relationships with more curiosity and less reactivity. This awareness transforms our interactions from sources of conflict into opportunities for growth. Projections also appear in our positive judgments of others. When we idealize someone, putting them on a pedestal, we're often projecting our own potential onto them. This positive projection can be just as limiting as negative ones, as it denies our own capacity for greatness while attributing it solely to others. The key to working with projections lies in developing the ability to catch ourselves in the act of projecting and using these moments as opportunities for self-reflection. When we feel triggered by someone's behavior, we can pause and ask, what might this reaction tell me about myself? This practice helps us reclaim the parts of ourselves we've disowned and project onto others. Through conscious work with projections, we begin to see others more clearly, free from the distortions of our own unacknowledged shadow material. This clarity leads to more authentic relationships and a deeper understanding of ourselves. As we reclaim our projected qualities, we become more whole, more integrated, and more capable of genuine connection with others. Working with projections is an ongoing process. Each interaction that triggers us contains the seed of self-discovery, if we're willing to look honestly at our reactions. By understanding that what we hate in others lives within us, we open the door to profound personal transformation and growth. Lesson 3. Facing fears reveals hidden strengths. Fear is perhaps the most powerful force that keeps us from exploring our shadow aspects. When we encounter fear, our initial reaction is often to run away or avoid what frightens us. Yet, these very fears hold the key to discovering our most profound strengths and untapped potential. The shadow contains what we're most afraid to acknowledge about ourselves, making fear an essential signpost on our journey toward wholeness. Our fears typically manifest in various forms, from the fear of inadequacy to the fear of our own power. Many people fear their anger, believing it makes them a bad person, while others fear their vulnerability, seeing it as weakness. These fears often stem from early experiences where certain aspects of ourselves were deemed unacceptable by family, society, or culture. As a result, we learn to push these parts into the shadow, creating a pattern of avoidance that continues into adulthood. The transformation process begins with acknowledging these fears without judgment. When we face what frightens us, we often discover that the monster under the bed isn't nearly as terrifying as we imagined. For instance, someone who fears their anger might discover upon closer examination that their anger carries important messages about boundaries and self-respect. The fear of being seen as selfish might mask a healthy need for self-care and personal boundaries. Vulnerability plays a crucial role in this process. By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in exploring our fears, we create space for genuine transformation. This vulnerability isn't weakness. Rather, it's the courage to face ourselves honestly and openly. When we dare to look at what scares us, we often find that our fears have been protecting something valuable, a strength, a gift, or a truth about ourselves that we weren't ready to acknowledge. The anatomy of fear reveals that most of our deep-seated fears are connected to survival mechanisms developed early in life. These fears served a purpose at one time, helping us cope with challenging situations or environments. However, as adults, many of these fears no longer serve us and instead hold us back from fully expressing our authentic selves. Understanding this helps us approach our fears with compassion rather than judgment. Common shadow fears often include the fear of power, the fear of being unlovable, the fear of success, and the fear of our own darkness. Each of these fears masks a corresponding strength. The fear of power often indicates untapped leadership abilities. The fear of being unlovable might hide a deep capacity for love and connection. The fear of success could mask extraordinary potential waiting to be realized. The transformation process involves gradually exposing ourselves to what we fear while maintaining a sense of safety and control. This might involve working with a therapist, joining a support group, or engaging in personal shadow work through journaling and meditation. As we face our fears, we begin to recognize that they often point to our greatest potential for growth and development. During this process, it's essential to understand that strength doesn't come from eliminating fear, but from developing a new relationship with it. Fear can become a compass, pointing us toward areas where growth and transformation are possible. When we learn to listen to our fears rather than run from them, they become valuable guides on our journey of self-discovery. The path of facing fears requires patience and persistence. Each small step in facing what scares us builds confidence and reveals new aspects of our strength. This gradual process of confronting and integrating our fears leads to a more authentic and empowered way of being in the world. Through this work, we discover that our fears have been guarding our most precious gifts, waiting for us to be ready to claim them. As we continue this journey of facing our fears, we begin to experience a profound shift in how we view ourselves and our capabilities. The very aspects of ourselves that we once feared become sources of strength, wisdom, and personal power. This transformation doesn't eliminate fear from our lives, but changes our relationship with it, allowing us to move forward with courage and authenticity despite our fears. Lesson 4. Your shadow creates your light. The relationship between light and darkness is one of the most fundamental patterns in nature and human psychology. Just as we cannot have day without night, we cannot truly experience our light without acknowledging our darkness. This profound principle of polarity lies at the heart of shadow work and personal transformation. When we suppress or deny aspects of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, we inadvertently dim our entire being. The energy required to keep these shadow elements at bay depletes the very vitality we need to express our authentic selves. Consider how a person who denies their anger might also suppress their passion or how someone who rejects their vulnerability might also block their capacity for deep connection. The polarity principle teaches us that every quality exists in relation to its opposite. Courage cannot exist without fear. Joy cannot be fully experienced without knowing sorrow, and strength emerges through confronting weakness. By understanding this dynamic, we begin to see how our shadow aspects are not our enemies, but rather the other half of our wholeness. Integration differs fundamentally from suppression. While suppression requires constant energy to maintain and create internal conflict, integration allows for a natural flow between different aspects of our psyche. When we integrate our shadow, we don't become our darkness. We become whole. This wholeness allows us to access the full spectrum of human experience and expression. Consider an artist who has been told their whole life to be practical and realistic. Their creative shadow might manifest as self-doubt, procrastination, or cynicism about art. Through shadow work, they might discover that these very obstacles contain the seeds of their artistic voice. The self-doubt might reveal a deep care for quality. The procrastination might mask a fear of inadequacy that drives excellence, and the cynicism might hide a profound sensitivity to beauty. The path to authenticity requires us to embrace both our light and shadow aspects. When we deny our shadow, we often create personas that are one-dimensional and inauthentic. These personas might be socially acceptable, but they lack the depth and richness that come from embracing our full nature. True authenticity emerges when we can acknowledge and integrate all parts of ourselves. This integration process often reveals surprising connections between our perceived flaws and our greatest gifts. A person who struggles with being too sensitive might discover that this same sensitivity allows them to be deeply empathetic and intuitive. Someone who battles with perfectionism might find that this drive, when properly channeled, enables them to create work of exceptional quality. The shadow also serves as a protective mechanism, holding energies that were too intense or threatening for our younger selves to handle. As we mature and develop greater capacity for complexity, we can begin to release these protections and access the vital energy they contain. This release often feels like coming home to ourselves, as if pieces of a puzzle are finally falling into place. Through shadow work, we learn that light and darkness are not moral absolutes, but rather complementary forces that create the fullness of human experience. Our task is not to eliminate the shadow, but to bring it into conscious relationship with our light. This relationship creates a dynamic tension that fuels growth, creativity, and authentic self-expression. The journey of integrating shadow and light is ongoing. As we evolve, new aspects of our shadow may emerge, offering fresh opportunities for growth and integration. Each time we face and integrate a shadow aspect, we become more whole, more authentic, and more capable of expressing our true nature. In this way, our shadow truly becomes the source of our light, transforming what we once feared into the very essence of our power and authenticity. Lesson 5. True power comes from embracing all parts. The concept of wholeness lies at the heart of shadow integration. When we resist certain aspects of ourselves, we create an internal divide that drains our energy and diminishes our power. True power emerges when we embrace all parts of ourselves, both the aspects we celebrate and those we'd rather keep hidden. Integration begins with acknowledgement. We must first recognize that every part of our psyche serves a purpose, even those parts we've labeled as negative or undesirable. The inner critic that we fight against might actually be trying to protect us from rejection. The anger we suppress might hold the key to establishing healthy boundaries. The perfectionism we battle might be channeling our drive for excellence. Working with resistance is a crucial aspect of integration. When we encounter internal pushback against accepting certain shadow aspects, it's essential to approach this resistance with curiosity rather than judgment. Resistance often indicates that we're touching upon something significant, a part of ourselves that holds profound transformation potential. Instead of forcing our way through resistance, we can dialogue with it, understanding its protective function and gradually building trust with these guarded aspects of ourselves. The process of building internal harmony requires patience and consistent practice. It involves creating safe spaces within ourselves, where different aspects of our personality can coexist. This might mean allowing our professional self to acknowledge our playful side, or letting our spiritual nature embrace our earthly desires. When we stop forcing these different parts to compete for dominance, we discover they can work together in surprising and powerful ways. Integration techniques vary, but they all share the common goal of bringing awareness to our fragmented parts and facilitating their reunion. Active imagination, where we engage in dialogue with different aspects of ourselves, can help bridge the gap between conscious and unconscious elements. Shadow journaling allows us to explore and document our internal landscape, tracking patterns and progress in our integration journey. Body-based practices help us recognize how different aspects of our shadow manifest physically, providing another avenue for integration work. One of the most powerful outcomes of integration is the release of energy that was previously locked in maintaining internal barriers. When we no longer need to suppress or fight against parts of ourselves, that energy becomes available for creative expression, emotional connection, and personal growth. This liberation of energy often manifests as increased vitality, clearer intuition, and a stronger sense of personal authority. The Wholeness principle teaches us that our power doesn't come from perfecting ourselves or eliminating our negative aspects. Instead, it emerges from creating harmony between all our parts. This harmony doesn't mean that all parts agree or operate in the same way. Rather, it's about creating a dynamic balance where different aspects of ourselves can contribute their unique strengths to our overall well-being. Building internal harmony also requires us to challenge our cultural conditioning around what parts of ourselves are acceptable. Society often encourages us to present a polished, consistent image while hiding our complexity. True integration involves questioning these external standards and developing our own authentic relationship with all aspects of our nature. As we progress in our integration work, we begin to experience moments of profound wholeness, times when we can hold space for all our contradictions and still feel at peace. These experiences show us that true power isn't about domination or control, but about orchestrating all parts of ourselves into a harmonious whole. Each integrated aspect adds its voice to our internal chorus, creating a fuller, richer expression of who we are. The journey toward wholeness is ongoing, but each step toward integration brings us closer to experiencing our full potential. As we embrace all parts of ourselves, we discover that our power wasn't in the light or the shadow alone. It was in their dance together, in the dynamic interplay of all aspects of our being. Lesson 6. Denied emotions control your life. Our emotional landscape is vast and complex, yet from an early age, we learn to suppress certain feelings deemed inappropriate or uncomfortable. This emotional suppression becomes a cornerstone of our shadow, creating invisible chains that control our behaviors, decisions, and relationships. When we deny our emotions, we inadvertently give them more power over our lives, allowing them to operate beneath our conscious awareness. Consider anger, an emotion many of us are taught to suppress. We learn that expressing anger is inappropriate, unprofessional, or unbecoming. Yet the more we push this natural emotion down, the more it manifests in indirect ways. Passive, aggressive behavior, sudden outbursts, physical tension, or even chronic health issues. The denied emotion doesn't disappear. It simply finds alternative routes of expression. This pattern of denial extends beyond anger to encompass a wide range of emotions: sadness, fear, jealousy, desire, and even joy. Sometimes we suppress positive emotions because we've learned they make others uncomfortable or because we fear they'll be taken away. Each suppressed emotion becomes a dark corner in our psyche, a place where our shadow grows stronger. The cost of emotional denial is substantial. It drains our energy as we constantly work to keep certain feelings at bay. It distorts our relationships as we project our denied emotions onto others or attract situations that force us to confront what we're avoiding. It compromises our decision-making abilities as we operate from a place of emotional disconnect rather than wholeness. Reclaiming our emotional power begins with acknowledgement. We must first recognize that all emotions are valid messengers, carrying important information about our needs, boundaries, and desires. Even the emotions we label as negative serve essential functions in our psychological well-being. Anger helps us identify boundary violations and motivates us to take action. Fear alerts us to potential dangers and encourages caution. Sadness helps us process loss and connect with others through shared vulnerability. The process of emotional integration requires us to create a safe internal space where all emotions are welcome. This doesn't mean acting on every emotional impulse, but rather developing the capacity to feel fully without being overwhelmed. It involves building emotional literacy, learning to identify and name our emotions with greater precision and understanding their messages. Working with denied emotions often reveals surprising insights. Many discover that beneath their chronic anger lies deep hurt or unmet needs for respect. Others find that their persistent anxiety masks excitement or creative energy they've learned to suppress. As we welcome these emotions back into consciousness, we begin to reclaim parts of ourselves that have been living in shadow. Practical emotional integration involves regular check-ins with our emotional state, allowing ourselves to feel without judgment or immediate attempt to fix or change the emotion. It means developing healthy outlets for emotional expression, whether through movement, art, writing, or verbal communication. It also involves learning to regulate our emotional experience, finding the balance between suppression and overwhelming expression. As we integrate our denied emotions, we often discover they carry wisdom and energy that can serve our growth. The rage we've suppressed might fuel positive changes in our lives or communities. The grief we've avoided might deepen our capacity for empathy and connection. The joy we've dampened might lead us toward more authentic self-expression. The journey of emotional integration is ongoing. There will always be moments when we instinctively want to push away uncomfortable feelings. However, as we practice acceptance and integration, we develop greater emotional resilience. We become less controlled by our denied emotions and more able to use their energy constructively. In this way, emotional integration becomes not just a psychological practice, but a path to greater personal power and authenticity. Lesson 7. Self-acceptance starts in the shadows. The journey to self-acceptance begins in the darkest corners of our psyche, where we've hidden the parts of ourselves we deemed unworthy of love. These abandoned aspects of our being cry out for recognition, healing, and integration, healing, and integration. The path to genuine self-acceptance requires us to venture into these shadows and embrace what we find there, no matter how uncomfortable or challenging it may seem. Shame plays a central role in our rejection of certain aspects of ourselves. From early childhood, we learn what is acceptable and what isn't, what brings praise and what brings criticism. Over time, we internalize these messages and begin to hide away parts of ourselves that don't fit the mold of what we believe we should be. This creates a fractured sense of self, where we present one face to the world while suppressing another. The shadow aspects of self-love are particularly complex because they often manifest as self-sabotage. We might claim to love ourselves while simultaneously engaging in behaviors that undermine our well-being. This contradiction exists because true self-love must encompass both our light and our darkness. When we only accept our positive qualities, we create an unstable foundation for self-worth that crumbles in the face of our inevitable human imperfections. Working with shame requires tremendous courage. It means looking directly at the parts of ourselves we've judged as unlovable and choosing to love them anyway. This process often brings up resistance, as our protective mechanisms fight to maintain the status quo. Yet it's precisely these rejected aspects that hold the key to our wholeness. By embracing our perceived flaws, we paradoxically become more complete and authentic. The practice of shadow integration and self-acceptance involves several layers. First, we must acknowledge the existence of our denied aspects without judgment. This means creating space to observe our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with curiosity rather than criticism. As we develop this witnessing consciousness, we begin to see how our shadow qualities often serve or have served a protective function in our lives. Through this process, we learn to appreciate the wisdom of our shadow. For instance, what we label as neediness might actually be a legitimate desire for connection that was shamed in childhood. Our anger issues might be a natural response to boundaries being crossed. By reframing these shadow aspects, we can begin to see their value and integrate them more consciously into our lives. The journey to self-acceptance through shadow work also involves recognizing that our perceived imperfections are part of our shared humanity. When we hide our struggles and vulnerabilities, we perpetuate the illusion of separation and fuel our shame. By acknowledging our shadow aspects, we open ourselves to deeper connections with others who share similar challenges. Integration practices for self-acceptance might include mirror work, where we look into our own eyes and speak words of acceptance to all parts of ourselves. Journaling can help us dialogue with our shadow aspects, understanding their needs and motivations. Meditation and body awareness practices can help us stay present with uncomfortable feelings that arise as we face our rejected parts. The ultimate goal of shadow work in self-acceptance is not to eliminate our perceived flaws or transform them into something else. Rather, it's to expand our capacity to hold all aspects of ourselves with compassion and understanding. This includes our achievements and failures, our kindness and our cruelty, our wisdom and our foolishness. As we develop this more inclusive self-acceptance, we naturally become more accepting of others as well. By starting our journey to self-acceptance in the shadows, we build a foundation that can weather any storm. We learn that true self-love isn't about being perfect or only embracing our positive qualities. It's about having the courage to be real, to be human, and to love ourselves not despite our shadows, but including them. This complete acceptance becomes the basis for authentic living and genuine relationships with others. Lesson 8. Hidden gifts wait in your darkness. Within the depths of our shadow self lie dormant talents and untapped potential that we've forgotten or ever knew existed. These hidden gifts often manifest as the very qualities we admire in others, but believe we lack ourselves. The process of shadow work reveals that many of our perceived weaknesses actually contain the seeds of our greatest strengths. Consider the person who feels they are too sensitive and has learned to suppress their emotional nature. Within this apparent weakness lies the potential for profound empathy, artistic expression, and deep emotional intelligence. Their sensitivity, when embraced rather than denied, becomes a powerful tool for understanding themselves and others, possibly leading to careers in counseling, arts, or humanitarian work. The golden shadow represents the positive qualities we deny in ourselves, often due to early life experiences or societal conditioning. Perhaps you were taught that being ambitious was selfish, so you buried your drive for success. Or maybe you learned that being playful was childish, so you suppressed your natural creativity. These denied aspects don't disappear. They simply wait in the darkness for recognition and integration. Transforming weaknesses into strengths requires a fundamental shift in perspective. What we perceive as flaws often contain unique advantages. The perfectionist who struggles with never feeling good enough carries within them the capacity for excellence and attention to detail. The person who fears conflict might possess natural diplomatic abilities. The key lies in recognizing these shadow aspects not as burdens to overcome, but as raw materials waiting to be shaped into powerful assets. The process of discovering shadow talents begins with curiosity rather than judgment. When we encounter traits in others that provoke strong reactions, whether positive or negative, we must ask ourselves what these reactions reveal about our own hidden qualities. The leader we resent might be reflecting our own buried leadership abilities. The artist we envy might be mirroring our unexpressed creativity. Working with the golden shadow involves conscious exploration of our perceived limitations. Through journaling, meditation, and honest self-reflection, we can begin to identify patterns in our life where we've consistently denied or diminished our capabilities. These patterns often point directly to our untapped potential. The areas where we feel most inadequate frequently indicate where our greatest gifts lie dormant. Our darkness contains not only our fears and weaknesses, but also our most powerful untapped resources. The very aspects of ourselves we've pushed into shadow often represent our most unique and valuable contributions to the world. The person who has learned to hide their intensity might discover their passion makes them an inspiring leader. The one who believes they are too analytical might find their detail-oriented nature makes them an exceptional problem solver. The journey of accessing untapped potential requires courage and patience. It means being willing to challenge our long-held beliefs about who we are and what we're capable of achieving. As we bring these hidden gifts into consciousness, we must also be prepared for the responsibility that comes with claiming our full power. This might mean stepping into leadership roles we previously avoided, expressing creativity we've kept hidden, or using our voice in ways that feel uncomfortable at first. Integrating these shadow talents doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of acknowledgement, acceptance, and conscious development. Each small step toward embracing our hidden gifts builds confidence and creates momentum for further growth. As we begin to operate from a place of wholeness rather than limitation, we discover that our perceived weaknesses often contain the very qualities needed for our success and fulfillment. The gifts waiting in our darkness represent our unique contribution to the world. By embracing these aspects of ourselves, we not only enhance our own lives, but also become better equipped to serve others. Our transformed weaknesses become the very tools we use to make our most meaningful impact, turning our personal shadow work into a gift that benefits the collective whole. Lesson 9. Inner peace needs whole acceptance. The pursuit of inner peace often leads us down paths of partial acceptance, where we embrace what feels comfortable while continuing to reject what disturbs us. This selective approach to self-acceptance creates an internal war that makes lasting peace impossible. True inner peace emerges only when we extend acceptance to all aspects of our being, including those parts we've labeled as unworthy or unacceptable. Many spiritual seekers fall into the trap of toxic positivity, believing that inner peace comes from focusing solely on light and love while suppressing or denying darker emotions and impulses. This approach might provide temporary relief, but ultimately deepens the divide within ourselves. The shadow aspects we reject don't disappear. They continue to influence our lives from beneath the surface, creating tension and internal conflict that manifests as anxiety, depression, or unexplained emotional outbursts. Working with inner conflict requires a radical shift in perspective. Instead of viewing our various aspects as good or bad, we must recognize them as different parts of our whole self, each serving a purpose in our psychological ecosystem. The anger we try to suppress might be protecting our boundaries. The jealousy we condemn might be pointing to unfulfilled desires. The fear we battle might be keeping us safe from genuine threats. When we begin to listen to these shadow aspects with curiosity rather than judgment, we start to understand their protective roles in our psyche. Building inner harmony involves creating dialogue between conflicting parts of ourselves. This process requires patience and compassion, as we're essentially mediating between aspects of our personality that have been at war for years or even decades. Through methods like active imagination or journaling, we can give voice to these different parts, allowing them to express their concerns and needs. This dialogue often reveals that what we perceived as destructive forces within us are actually trying to help, albeit in ways that may no longer serve our adult selves. Sustainable peace practices involve regular check-ins with our whole self, including our shadow aspects. This might mean setting aside time each day to sit with uncomfortable emotions, acknowledging and feeling them fully without trying to change or fix them. It means developing the capacity to stay present with internal discomfort rather than seeking immediate relief through distraction or suppression. This presence gradually builds our tolerance for the full range of human experience. Integration of opposing forces within us doesn't mean they stop existing or that conflict disappears entirely. Rather, it means we develop the capacity to hold space for different aspects of ourselves without being torn apart by their opposition. Like a skilled conductor leading an orchestra, we learn to appreciate how different instruments contribute to the overall symphony of our being, even when they seem to clash. The path to inner peace through whole acceptance requires us to question our fundamental assumptions about what peace means. Perhaps peace isn't the absence of conflict, but rather the ability to remain centered and whole in the midst of life's natural tensions. It's not about achieving a permanent state of tranquility, but developing the capacity to flow with life's ever-changing nature while maintaining our connection to our core self. This journey of whole acceptance transforms our relationship with ourselves and, by extension, with others and the world around us. As we learn to accept the full spectrum of our own humanity, we naturally extend that acceptance to others. We become less reactive to others' shadow aspects because we've made peace with our own. This is how individual shadow work contributes to collective healing and peace. The practice of whole acceptance is ongoing. Each day brings new opportunities to choose between rejection and acceptance, between fragmentation and integration. Each moment offers a chance to practice being with what is, rather than fighting against our experience. This is the path to sustainable inner peace, not through elimination of what disturbs us, but through expanding our capacity to embrace all that we are. Lesson 10. Your demons become your angels. The ultimate paradox of shadow work lies in the profound realization that our deepest wounds often contain our greatest gifts. What we initially perceive as demons, our fears, insecurities, and darker aspects, can transform into our most powerful allies through conscious integration and acceptance. This transformation isn't merely metaphorical. It represents a fundamental shift in our relationship with ourselves and our understanding of human nature. Consider the story of Maria, a woman who spent years battling her intense anger. She viewed her rage as a demon that threatened to destroy her relationships and career. Through shadow work, she discovered that her anger contained vital messages about her boundaries and self-worth. As she learned to listen to and channel this energy constructively, her former demon became a protective force, helping her stand up for herself and others with clarity and strength. The transformation of our shadow aspects follows a natural alchemical process. Just as base metals were thought to transform into gold through ancient alchemical practices, our psychological shadows can transmute into valuable aspects of our personality. This process requires patience, courage, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. When we face our shadows directly, we often find that they lose their threatening appearance and reveal their true nature as misunderstood parts of ourselves seeking integration. James, a perfectionist who constantly criticized himself and others, discovered through shadow work that his inner critic stemmed from a deep desire for growth and excellence. By embracing this aspect rather than fighting it, he transformed his harsh inner voice into a wise mentor that could guide him while maintaining compassion and understanding. His demon of perfectionism became an angel of discernment and continuous improvement. The transformation process often reveals that our shadows contain exactly what we need for our personal evolution. The shy person's shadow might hold their natural leadership abilities. The people pleaser's shadow often contains healthy assertiveness and self-prioritization. What appears dark and threatening initially often contains the very qualities we need to become whole. Living as an integrated being means maintaining an ongoing dialogue with all aspects of ourselves. This doesn't mean our shadows disappear. Rather, they become conscious allies in our journey. When we face challenging situations, we can draw upon the transformed energy of our former demons. The aggressive impulses we once feared might become the courage to stand up for important causes. Our selfishness might transform into healthy self-care and boundary setting. Sarah's story illustrates this beautifully. Her shadow of perfectionism and control initially manifested as obsessive behavior and anxiety. Through conscious work with these aspects, she discovered they contained her natural gifts for organization and attention to detail. Her former demons became angels that guided her to a successful career as a project manager, where these very qualities were valued and needed. Maintaining shadow awareness requires regular practice and vigilance. we must remember that integration is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing process. New shadow aspects may emerge as we grow and face different life challenges. The key is to approach these emergences with curiosity rather than fear, knowing that each shadow contains a potential gift. This transformation process fundamentally changes our relationship with ourselves and others. When we understand that our demons can become angels, we approach our flaws and struggles with more compassion and curiosity. This understanding extends to others as well. We recognize that their challenging behaviors might also be unintegrated shadows seeking transformation. The journey of shadow integration leads to a more authentic and empowered way of being. As our demons transform into angels, we access more of our natural power and potential. We move through life with greater awareness, compassion, and effectiveness, knowing that every aspect of ourselves, even those we once feared or rejected, has its place and purpose in our psychological ecosystem.